Doing your current job well is important, but it may not be enough to get promoted because operations managers are expected to improve the entire operation, not just manage their own shift. Today in Leadership Unscripted, we're going to talk about how to get promoted from shift supervisor, whether you're a leader, a supervisor, a team lead, to an operations manager. Now, let's discuss the gap that's displayed when we're talking about supervisors, team leads, leaders, to an operations manager. What are some of those promotion gaps? Shift supervisors usually focus on assigning work, and very valuable. But when we're talking about what are the gaps between the supervisor and the operations manager, we're talking about the supervisors assigning work to individual employees to their specific tasks that are very necessary for customer deliveries, for right through the whole process. Supervisors are responsible for managing the daily issues. So the very specific detailed issues, such as there's a technical issue on the machine and we need to troubleshoot it to realize that we need to replace a tool, or we need some additional copies of paperwork. There's many different things. Covering staffing. So if somebody doesn't show up, in some companies, the supervisor would jump on the machine or jump on the assembly line. It all depends on your organization. So that's a significant difference between a supervisor and operations manager. Keeping the shift moving, making sure that everybody has the tools they need. We always, you talk about, you hear people talk about the employee, the CNC machinist, the setup technician, the assembly technician. They're the surgeon, and the supervisor and the leaders are trying to make sure that they have all the tools that are necessary to do their job. Operations managers also focus on, more specifically, improving systems. So looking at the overall production, supply chain paths and seeing where are the big bottlenecks, where are the big issues within that system, and improving that system so that when a new employee comes into that system, they're successful and they're moving forward much quicker. So systems deal with multiple people within those systems. Developing leaders. Operations managers are looking to develop leaders, especially from my perspective. I always want to develop all of my leaders so that they can do the exact same thing that I'm doing, analyzing data, looking at absenteeism and late rates, looking at things that are at a larger time base. You're looking at the last 3 months to see how well you performed with efficiency and quality, looking at all those things. So that an operations manager wants to develop their leaders. Operations managers are managing cost, quality, safety, and productivity. Supervisors are doing that too, but typically they're focused more on the task base and not necessarily always the analysis perspective. Within my company that I work at, I love it when the supervisors, the leaders of those departments, are getting deep into the noise of the data and understanding it better than me. I mean, they've got a specific department to manage, and I love it when they know more about how to improve their department than I do. Creating consistency across shifts. So supervisors typically are looking at, if you have shift supervisors, you have a day shift, afternoons, a night shift supervisor. They're looking at how well the shift performs. Well, the operations manager or that manufacturing manager is looking at how well the whole chain of varying shifts and varying departments is performing, not just an individual shift, and making sure that those shifts are balanced so that you're able to run machines, do things 24/7 in your operation across more machines. Solving recurring problems. So where the supervisors typically looking at firefighting and dealing with getting the machine running, getting the job in spec, in terms of control charts or quality issues. The operations manager is looking at, okay, we look back 6 months and we see there's these many issues and these are the top 3 issues and they keep recurring. Well, how do we reduce those reoccurrences by fixing fixturing, documentation processes, assembly procedures to reduce those from reoccurring? Effort is not the same as readiness. So you can put in the effort, but it's not the same as being ready. Long hours do not automatically prove readiness. There are leaders that work long hours, operations or supervisors, yet they perceive that long hours mean the operation, the department's going to perform better. And there are leaders that don't think like that. They just work extra hours because they're putting in the extra work. So there's 2 different types of things. But there are people out there that consider, oh, you're only working this many hours. You need to work this many hours, and that's your issue. Well, that's completely, from my perspective, false. And I would like if you comment what your perspective is on that. Maybe we get some discussion around, do you think working long hours is critical to, or does it correlate with performance? Or do you think not working long hours doesn't necessarily correlate? So put your comments about working long hours, not working out long hours, and whether that correlates to performance. And I'd love to get some further discussion. And if you like what you're hearing so far and you want to hear more videos on manufacturing leadership, whether it be in CNC machining or assembly or other processes, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and it helped me push it out to other people. Other things to consider. Leaders need to see results, not just activity. Ask, is the operation improving? So it's very critical when you're looking at what you as a supervisor is providing, putting in the effort. Is your operation improving? Can the team perform well without me? So if you're trying to move into an operation, you want to, within your department, forget about the future, but just think about it. You've got a department already within your control. How can you create redundancy? How can you give skills to the people within your department to allow them to do the job, the necessary jobs, the necessary analysis without you, so that when you're not there, it runs? That's a sign that you're moving in the direction of an operations manager. Am I developing other people? So as I mentioned again, make sure you're continually developing people so that you have succession plans, because it's difficult to move out of a position if you don't have a successor. When you have a successor and a position becomes available for you, perhaps in operations management, then you can indicate that to your boss and you can say, hey, I've got a successor, I've cross-trained, so that he feels a little more comfortable if he moves you to your position. Another thing to consider, am I solving root causes or constantly reacting? So if you're constantly reacting and never solving root causes to prevent reoccurrence, you're still operating in supervisor mode, in direct department leadership mode, and that is completely fine. But again, if you're looking to move into an operations manager role, you need to start looking at preventing reoccurrence within your current department. 5 promotion signals. So things to consider as signals of promotion. Improve measurable results. So track improvements in safety, quality, productivity, overtime, waste, attendance, change over time, or schedule performance. So when you can start showing your boss, hey, the start of January 2026, the quality rate was at this point, the efficiency rate was here, the safety rate was here, overtime rate was here. And then you put in specific actions to improve some of those items. And in 6 months, you can show, well, this is where we are now, and it's attributable because of these things that I put in place. and then you do that another 6 months. So when you start improving and tracking your own metrics, and you communicate this with your boss or your boss's boss, this shows that you're moving more into an operations manager type mindset. Again, as I said, show the starting point and the result. So every 6 months, perhaps every 3 months, focus on outcomes rather than simply listing tasks. So you want to be talking about what were the outcomes of what you put in place, not what the tasks were, because the bottom line is the bottom line. It's the profit. So if you can attribute what you're doing to bring in more profit into the company, increase revenue because you're able to put more throughput through in a month, those are things that you can talk about. Those are results, not necessarily the tasks, but how you got there and what the results were because of those tasks. Develop other leaders. Number 2. So first we talked about, when we talked about the promotion signals, we talked about improve measurable results. Number 2, develop leaders. Train leaders and supervisors. So this is another thing, is a signal that you're moving in the direction of an operations manager, is you're starting to train. Perhaps you're a supervisor and you have some leads, or maybe you don't, but you're developing them. Train. Continue to cross-train so that you have successors. Delegate meaningful responsibility. So if you have people that perhaps they do this particular job, but you would say, hey, do you want to take on this responsibility? It's an extra 2 hours looking at continuous improvement. And they say, yes, great. So you're learning how to delegate responsibilities to others. Coach people to make better decisions. So when you see somebody come with a problem and you just, they come with an issue, but they don't necessarily have a solution, well, try to coach them into starting to think about the problem, going through the root cause process, and coming up with solutions. It's when you start training people to think through problems and come up with solutions, you probably will typically get better solutions from them than just fixing their issues. Build a team that can operate without constant intervention, without you getting involved. And when you're not there, it runs smooth. That's the kind of team you want to build, because that proves that you're signaled to move into an operations manager role. A future operations manager creates more capable leaders. So that's why it's really critical. Number 3, understand the full operation. So again, you're in your current supervisor role. You're not an operations manager role, but you want to understand the full operation. Do not improve one result while damaging another. So that's an important point. So when you're looking at improvements, you're saying, we need, so that we don't run out of parts, we need to bring in extra whip, extra material, extra working, extra bolts and screws. And we need to stock them here. Yeah, sure, it's all great and dandy. However, that's extra inventory. So now you have to think about, okay, I'm bringing in this extra whip, extra inventory to help deal with a bottleneck issue, but now I've created extra inventory that's sitting on my balance sheet. And you have to think about all of these things. So not just fixing one problem, but seeing how it impacts and does it damage something else. Consider the impact on safety. So if you put in, this specific fixture, does it create a safety issue? Because now you have to use a bunch of Allen keys, and they can slip, and you can cut yourself off the fixture or something when the Allen key slips. So when you're putting processes in, you're also thinking about safety, quality, productivity, all the other, how other shifts are going to be able to deal with it if the other shifts have support. Show to your boss that you understand operational trade-offs, and be willing to accept feedback from your boss and not always say no to things, and be able to trade off with your boss when he says, hey, or she says, hey, let's implement this. Not always saying no, but being able to give and take a bit, because there's not ever a perfect answer, perfect solution. And If somebody thinks there's a perfect solution, comment. Let's get the comments going. Solve reoccurring problems. So number 4 of 5 signals for the operations manager. Number 4, solve reoccurring problems. Identify what keeps happening and why. So there are many different ways. There's the DMAIC, Six Sigma process. There's 8D process. There's root cause corrective action using 5 whys. There's many different processes to do root cause and corrective action, but it's important to understand what's reoccurring and why it's happening so that you can solve it. If you put in a countermeasure or something, let's say you're trying to prove out what's happening and why it's happening, test your hypothesis. You know, if you're saying it's because if it's because when the tool, let's say you're turning a part and you're saying, okay, when I take off 10th off that part, it creates a bad surface finish for the finishing turn. Well, perhaps you say, okay, I'm going to go more extreme, and let's say you think you're not taking off enough material. Okay, so you say, okay, I'm only going to leave 2 thou. So you're going to go extreme to see if it leaves even a much worse surface finish. So test your counter and test your hypothesis. Measure the results. So when you're solving reoccurring problems, put it in place and track it to see if you're actually got 30% better or 50% better or 100% better on what you implemented. Standardize what works. So if you put in a process, again, we're talking about solving reoccurring problems. If you put in a process, document what the employee needs to do. If it's an assembly type process with clear pictures and understanding, these are all things that are showing that you're willing to work on preventing reoccurrence, something that an operations manager needs to do. And number 5, communicate upward with solutions. Here's the issue. Here's the impact. Here are the facts. Here are the possible solutions. Here's my recommendation. Here's what I need. This demonstrates ownership and business judgment. So let's go through that again. Communicate upward with solutions. So use the structure. So really understand when you're talking to your boss, understand here is the issue in detail. This is specifically what's going on. Here's the impact. It's this issue, this quality issue is causing 30% scrap on this particular part number. And you can even go into more detail and say each of those parts is worth $35 and we run 100 parts per month. So you calculate out 30% times the $35 of your total over the year, and you can calculate if you improve this, let's say by 20%, so now you only have 10% scrap. This is the savings from the bottom line that you'd save. So you're going through explaining the facts. So the issue, the impact, any extra facts, possible solutions. Here are the things that I'm considering improving from most likely to least likely. Or there's a couple of things that are going to help prove. I'm going to make a fixture for the actual engineering process, but I'm also going to add an additional inspection at a higher frequency rate to also deal with detection. And then also indicating, this is what I need, boss. This is the money I need to buy the fixtures or the support I need from engineering. This is what I need. So this demonstrates you own the issue and you have judgment, business judgment. So really critical. Build a promotion portfolio. Interesting point. Keep evidence of, again, measurable business results. So get a logbook. We're talking about you as a supervisor moving into an operations manager role in the future. Watch this video again and again and take just simple points. And even comments. Perhaps we'll get connected and we can go through some ways specifically how you can improve. but keep evidence of measurable business results, problems you solved, leaders you developed, cross-functional projects, difficult decisions you hurdled and handled, feedback you received, and how everything you're doing is impacting the business. Very, very important items. So one thing I've got here is you have sort of a plan put in place to figure out what you're going to do next. So when you have a conversation with your boss, you say, I want to grow into an operations manager role. What gaps do you see between my current performance and that role? And what results or leadership behaviors would you need to see from me over the next 6 months? What metrics should I own? Which projects would give me a broader exposure? Which skills should I strengthen? What experience am I missing? What would make you confident recommending me? So these are the things that you can even go into a meeting with your boss. It doesn't have to be a formal review. Just meet with your boss. What's the harm in having a conversation with your boss? Build a 90-day plan. Write this down, day 1 to 30. Clarify role expectations. Make it very clear what your expectations are. Choose one measurable business goal. Ask for honest feedback on it. Identify one reoccurring problem. So day 1 to 30. Day 31 to 60, lead an improvement project. Track the starting point. Involve other people and communicate progress. It shows that you can facilitate a project. Days 61 to 90, train someone else to maintain the improvement. So now somebody else is going to take on and manage the improvement. Present the results back to your boss. Explain the business impact. And request a progress review. So these are the things that are really critical in regards to going from a supervisor to an operations manager. Some mistakes that can delay promotion, waiting to be noticed. So if you just wait there for 5 years and don't say a thing, you may not go anywhere. Talking only about the effort you put in and not the results. So don't really focus on the effort, maybe some projects that got you to the results, but it's more about the results and how you got to the results. Don't take credit for the team. You want to show how you improve the team and you've developed a team to improve your department. Don't blame other departments. Don't refuse to delegate. So get used to delegating. It's a really critical task because you can't do everything. And you have people that want to be engaged. It's really important to engage your employees. Don't only focus on one metric, focus on a few. Pick 3. Don't reject feedback. Take feedback with you. And don't be a complainer. One final sentence. Do not wait for someone to guess that you are ready for the next role. Build measurable evidence that shows you can improve the operation, develop people, and lead beyond your current position.